Mucha suerte.
Thank you.
Okay, look, we've got lots of people here. This is excellent. Hello, Leslie, how are you? What time is it at your end?
Good morning. What time is it? It's 8 a.m.
That's not bad. It's
No, it's
in
okay.
California. It's much earlier. So what time did you actually get up?
I normally get up at about 6:45, and but I'm on vacation, so this is I'm in Florida, so this was a big pull for me.
Lucky you. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Not bad. Very. Are you in the Midlands or where are you?
I'm in London, South London.
Okay, so it's about 2 o'clock your time, isn't it?
It's 2 o'clock exactly. Yeah, just after
very
lunch.
nice. Okay,
Nice
so
to
thank
see
you for joining us, and I think it's going to be a really good session.
Good.
We're just waiting for people to come in. We should have maybe about 40, 50 people. And how is it all going for you in your lockdown at the moment? Mark, lost you.
No, I thought you were talking to the general public.
No, I'm talking to you. No, it's a very
Oh.
difficult talk on general public when you're virtually on Zoom.
No, it's fine. I'm working from home. So we decided that the most important people are the teachers out there who are going into the college, and us who are the readers can
Yes.
stay at home and read.
Yeah, very nice. Very good.
And about you?
Right. And we have Rosanna, how are you? Because you've attended previous sessions, haven't you, Rosanna?
I don't speak English.
That's okay. We have an interpreter. So can I just hello Eva, how are you? Can I give a little bit of instructions as we coming in? Are everybody's okay to listen? So on your Zoom window, it will say there's a interpretation button. So it's there's a next to a share screen, record, interpretation and reactions. There's a globe. It says interpretation session. So Rosanna, if you can click on interpretation session for me, please. Can you do that?
Rosana, abajo hay un signo, abajo a la derecha, de interpretación. Puedes elegir el canal del idioma que quieres escuchar o el inglés.
And then select Spanish.
Gracias.
Perfect. Now for the people who don't speak any Spanish, including me, and that includes also Eva, but I'm only assuming, hopefully well, Eva Lutanes, then what I would suggest that you also click on interpretation and you select the English channel. And the reason you select the English channel is that later on we will have people like Rosanna might be able to ask questions in Spanish. We have a fantastic interpreter. Her name is Yasmin, and she'll be interpreting from Spanish questions into English, so we can understand the questions then. All right?
Sí,
So,
lo voy a repetir en castellano, por si no han seleccionado la traducción. Todas las personas pueden elegir el idioma abajo en el botón de la derecha que dice interpretación. Y ahí pueden seleccionar el canal del castellano o del inglés. Okay? It is not here. Well.
All right, and then so we'll have most of the session will be in English, but there will be the questions. People will be able to ask questions in Spanish. Now, can I ask if you do through the session, if you have any questions, then if you can maybe type them into the message board. So there's a chat, one of the buttons called chat. If you click on that, you will see in the chat all the information about what you can do in terms of interpretation, how you can arrange your screen and so on. But in the chat, we would like to ask you if you can type then your questions. And as you type your questions in, then we'll do moderation and we'll have a time for you to ask the questions specifically to the presenters today. Hello, Yang. What time is it in China? How are you?
Yeah, it's 10 p.m. now. Yeah, I'm good.
There you go. So we have a really big difference in terms of timing. We have nearly at midnight, and then we have a very early on the other side in California. So there we go. I'm glad that we've been able to come together. I think, should we wait for another maybe minute or two?
I think we can start. I think we can start now.
So we're going to start. So just one more thing. There's a Doha, Qatar, 5 p.m. That's excellent. Thank you for letting us know. So we do have people all around the world. So Liv, I'm going to leave a screen to you to introduce today's session. And it's yours.
Then I count to 7. Welcome to this event in the series of Engage with Ideas, arranged by the Design Literacy International Network, which was established at the ADIM conference in London in 2019. Design literacy builds upon the idea that design is not a matter for professional designers alone. In order to move design in the direction of a better and greener tomorrow, non-designers, including the general public, needs to be involved. The general public in their position as users, clients, decision makers, and politicians need to be informed and skilled for making such involvement real. In other words, the general public will need to become design literate, preferably through their general education. Literacy in this context builds upon the ideas of the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire. Today, more and more decisions are based upon visual representations of design. Reading, writing, and arithmetic skills are no longer enough. Therefore, design literacy is of increased importance for democratic participation and local influence. Through this series, Engage with Ideas, it's our hope to open up for different perspectives on design literacy, both for professional designers and for the general public. It is a pleasure for the Design Literacy International Network to cooperate with UDD. So please welcome Alejandra Amendabar, Dean at the School of Design at UDD. The screen is yours, Alejandra.
Thank you, Liv. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be with you today to meet Liv and Eric, finally, who lead this international network, and also Shili and her co-author team, protagonist of this third session. I am proud that the UDD School of Design is part of this international network. I am also happy that a researcher from our area, Ursula Bravo, is leading initiatives that seek to connect people from different parts of the world interested in improving education through design. During 25 years, we have proposed to work to promote design as a central factor of innovation and development that contributes to a better quality of life for people. As we know, design can improve people's experiences, both through building physical and virtual environments and sharing methodologies for creative problem solving. In a developing country like ours, this is an ethical imperative that universities cannot ignore. And since we live in a global and interconnected village, we must do so in an interdisciplinary and collaborative way with academics from different parts of the world. I congratulate you on this initiative, and I wish you all the best in the current and the upcoming Design Literacy International Network talks. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you, Alejandra. I want to start by thanking Liv and Eric for making this network possible, and Alejandra for supporting me to be part of it. And of course, Shelly, Annie, Rose, and Melissa for sharing their work with us today. I met Shelly Goldman in 2016 at Stanford University. A few months before, with my colleague and friend Catalina Cortez, we had won a British Council fund to transfer design tools to Chilean school teachers. We were working with Peter Lloyd and Derek Jones, who had created the design thinking course for the Open University in the UK. Still, we wanted to know other models developed specifically for school context. Then the experiences of academics and professionals linked to this school and the Red Lab at Stanford seemed to us unavailable references. On our trip, we watched an after-school program in Palo Alto, and we attended a masterclass taught by Shelley and Maureen Carroll at the D School. Those experiences were very inspiring for us and valuable to our project. 2 years later, I met Eric and Liv at the DRS conference in Limerick, Ireland. Liv suggests the need to cultivate design literacy at all educational levels to generate transformation both at the conception patterns and citizen responsibility. I found this vision very powerful, and I thought it would be wonderful to connect these different perspectives focused on improving school and higher education through design. For this reason, when I had the opportunity to lead, together with Eric Bohemia, a special issue about design literacy for all, I didn't hesitate to invite Shirley to collaborate with a research paper. Luckily, she accepted. And this is how we are meeting today by Zoom to learn more about Shirley, Annie, Rose, Kimiko, and Melissa's work. Shirley Goldman is a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. She is an educational anthropologist studying learning in and out of the school. She works with administrators, teachers, and students, creating more opportunities for teaching and learning through design thinking. Shirley, Annie, Rose, and Melissa, welcome again. From now, you have the full control of the session, and you can share your screen.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me and my team to be here today. We feel really happy to engage with the Design International Network, and we're very excited to be able to talk with you today about how we are working with teachers through design thinking and our ideas about how teachers can develop and might be developing design literacy. So thank you very much. I did want to say you'll see there are 5 members of our team from our team photos, and Kimiko Lang, who is the last person in the row of photos, is not here today because she recently had a new baby girl. So we're wishing her a lot of love and luck with that. So I think that we can begin our talk right now and just get into it so that we could get to the question and answer period and have some discussion with you afterward. So if we could go to the first slide. Here's a quick outline of our talk. We're going to do some team introductions. Next, we are going to talk a little bit about the context for our work, which is the larger US context of schooling. Then we will move on to the particulars of our program on English learners and design thinking and that particular project, which is now in its 4th year. Then we will talk about a case example. And the last thing we will do is talk about some key ideas in the work, things that have emerged as key features of the work we're doing. And as you can see from the table of context, empathy will be one of those keys. Okay, if we move to the next slide. So who are we? We'll click on one more. Annie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Camiquo, and I am the Director of Research Practice Partnerships for an organization called Understanding Language in the Stanford Graduate School of Ed. The organization focuses on helping schools, school districts, and organizations and states build systems of support for multilingual students, including students designated as English learners. So students who are still learning English as a second, third, fourth language. I've been in education about 15 years, mostly as an English language development teacher. I've taught in New York, LA, Seattle. And on this project, I am the project director. My experience with design is really around different areas of education, from teaching, planning lessons and units. I've had a lot of experience with project-based learning, which has a lot of exploration and, trying to figure out different projects for problems, different content areas. I've also used design and systems improvement, so helping schools, school districts figure out how to make progress on a particular goal, and what does that look like in the classroom versus at the school level and at the district level. So lots of different areas of use for design. And my favorite part of design thinking is the idea of failing forward. So I think in education, and I think a lot of different fields, we have become perfectionists, and we're hesitant to make mistakes, and with design thinking, because the failing forward is built into the process, it's okay to try something out and have it not work out or make a mistake, because you learn so much from that. So that's my favorite aspect of design thinking. Next slide. Rose.
One second. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see all of you. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Rose, and I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Shelley Goldman is one of my advisors. And that's a lot of how I got into design, was beginning to work with Shelley here at Stanford on the English Learner and Design Thinking project. I also had some previous experience with design as a research assistant for a museum, actually the New York Hall of Science, where we were designing educational technologies that were trying to bridge the informal learning environment, the fun, the creativity of the exhibits on the museum with the formal school environment in New York City. So it's been really fun to get to continue my journey with design here at Stanford. And I've also been able to then use that experience in some corporate internships as well. And I think my favorite part of design thinking is really just testing prototypes and seeing the ideas in action. I've come to design as a researcher, and that's one of my favorite components, is then going sort of completing the loop and really testing things out with the people who we're supposedly designing for, and really getting that feedback and being able to refine and iterate. And I will also just briefly introduce Kimmy, who isn't able to be with us. I hope she's sleeping right now. She is another one of our research assistants, also fourth year at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. And she really came to design through being a classroom teacher. She gave us this quote here for the slide. She said, being a classroom teacher, it means designing every day. For example, I designed a year-long Japanese culture curriculum for teenagers from scratch. And this was when she was a Japanese teacher. Her favorite part of design thinking is working with colleagues who value creativity. She finds it so inspiring and invigorating, and she really inspires us and invigorates our team as well with her ideas. I'll hand it off to Melissa.
Thank you, Rose. Hello, everyone. Saludos a todos. My name is Melissa Messines. I am a doctoral candidate at Stanford, and I joined the English Learners and Design Thinking Project a couple of years ago. And I work as a research assistant as well alongside the team. And this was actually my first introduction to design thinking. I had never heard of design thinking before, but now I am a firm believer in it because I think our approach in particular really hones in on empathy and how empathy-based observations and the design thinking process really leads to highlighting existing knowledge and strengths that our students have and our teachers have, and that is allowed to be integrated with their creativity and the new prototypes that Rose was just talking about, being able to see those things come hand in hand. But for me in particular, as a former English learner in the US school system, it's great to see how innovative researchers and practitioners and educators are working together to really get a good sense of how we can support our students. So I think for me, it's on a very meaningful on a personal level. And I'm glad that now I can kind of be on the other side working along this great team and teachers to help our multilingual students in the US and hopefully abroad now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone on our team. It's wonderful to hear you talk about your experience. I am Shelley Goldman, and I am the principal investigator for these particular sets of projects. I am a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. I have been working in education for over 40 years, and I have been a teacher. I have been a school administrator. I have been a professor. I have done research on education. I have built curriculum and designed curriculum. And I have especially been working with design as a key feature of pedagogy and curriculum since 1992, when I stumbled across how intriguing it was for students to be able to work with design. My favorite part of design thinking is the prototyping process. I find that when people start to think with their hands, they're really starting to have transformative learning experiences. And I love to watch students begin a prototyping process and start to construct things with their hands to bring things to life that way, their ideas to life. And I find it very powerful. Okay, so we are going to move off introductions now. Hopefully when we get to the Q&A, if anybody has anything they want to know about our experiences and who we are, that would be great. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll talk about the context of our work. And we'll move one more slide, thank you. So I'm going to just give a brief some brief thoughts about the US education system. So many countries in the world have a centralized education system with national curriculum and national standards. Many countries have ministries or departments of education. I like to look at this picture of a barge that our dean had used to describe some things about education. And you see it's a moving monolithic machine. It has lots of different parts, lots of things to be happening, many boxes with different things in them, but they're all packaged together in one place with one central idea. Next slide. But on the other hand, the United States education system is more like this flotilla. The systems are decentralized and any standards are voluntary. We call them national, but for example, the current national standards we have really only support about 36% of students who are going to schools in the United States. So our system is a little bit more self-organizing. Education belongs to the states in the United States. There are 50 states. So when we have things like national standards movements, school districts can decide to be part of that, to be partially committed to that and committed to other things, or not committed at all. So that's the context that we work in the United States. What's important about the project that we work on is that if you pick 5 of those boats in the flotilla version, those would be equivalent to 5 of the small districts that we've been working with in our region on the projects on English learners and design thinking. So now let's go to the next slide. In this slide, we can see this is from our national science standards called the Next Generation Science Standards. And in the science standards, you can see that this is the one place where design is actually mentioned in US curriculum documents. And so the most recent version of this, and I'd say these are a few years old now, maybe like 5 or 7 years old, they have practices. And some of them are designated as belonging to engineering and design sciences. And so you could see asking questions. And what this chart does is we've kind of taken those engineering and science standards and practices, and then we've said how we've been able to map them on to different parts of the design thinking process that we engage with teachers and students. And this is adapted from a paper that I worked on with Molly
Esto está adaptado
Zielizinski.
de un paper en el que yo trabajé con Molly.
So, next slide.
Próxima slide, por favor.
So
Entonces,
our context is that we are
nuestro
working
contexto en el que
with
estamos trabajando
many students and teachers across a bunch of school districts. And I'm going to pass it on to Annie Kuo, who's going to talk specifically about our group in this huge flotilla of system.
So our project is based on this approach called the research practice partnerships. A research practice partnerships are collaborative long-term relationships between researchers and practitioners designed to improve problems of practice in education. So unlike traditional professional development relationships where, experts come in and, tell you what to do or provide content on a particular area or strategies, the researchers and practitioners identify the challenges and problems together and work collaboratively to find solutions. And so in our case, we worked with a number of districts around the Stanford University campus to use design thinking as the vehicle for looking at problems of practice and finding solutions. And for and this, our RPP was part of a larger collaborative, which was spearheaded by the dean, and really wanting to support students designated as English learners. So the students who are still learning English as their second, third, fourth language. So in this context of an RPP, it's us partnering with the school districts and trying to figure out, what are some ways that we can better support their students designated as English learners. We worked with different levels of the school district because we believe that in order to really facilitate long-term sustainable change, it's not just about the classroom, it's also about school leaders and district leaders. So in our project, all of the participants at different levels engage in the design thinking process, right? They go through an empathy interview, observations, and then they do prototyping. So there's a lot of different moving parts with the design thinking process. And it gets a little bit messy. And I think, a lot of our teachers aren't really used to that. They're used to, showing up to PD and getting some strategies. But in this way, they are able to understand their students better, understand the challenges that their students are facing better, and then really figure out, what it is that they're struggling with, and being able to prototype solutions for that. So next slide.
I'll pop in here to give a little bit more context about why we are focusing on multilingual learners. We chose this population because it was a portion of the students in the school districts we work with who the district leaders were very concerned about serving. Approximately 10% of all students in US public schools are considered to be learning English and get categorized for additional language support. There are many names for this student population, including limited English proficient as designated by the federal government, an English language learner, or even emergent bilingual. However, we prefer to refer to them as designated English learners to emphasize that the schools have labeled these students in a way that obscures their rich cultural, linguistic, academic, and life experiences. It also hides the fact that this population of students who are designated for extra English support is incredibly heterogeneous and includes not only students who are immigrants and are maybe learning their first words of English in school, but also students who were born in the US and maybe just learned a different language at home first before learning their formal academic English. Or, there are many other reasons because as Shelley pointed out, each state operates slightly differently in the US in terms of how they categorize their students. And then within each state, the districts take other routes as well. We also like the term designated English learner because in some way we are all English learners in the education system. And we want to acknowledge that language learning does not stop after reclassification, or even if you were born speaking one language, it is a lifelong process. These students who are designated as English learners are present in every school district, but not all school districts are equipped to help them succeed. Many districts with high numbers of designated English learners are underfunded. And in some of the wealthier districts, there can also be problems. In districts with 10% of designated English learners or fewer, sometimes where there's a long history of segregation in both explicit and covert ways that effectively separates the majority of the designated English learners from their monolingual peers. The challenge of serving these designated students is even more acute because we run into both structural and cultural problems at the school level and the district level. There is also this erroneous perception that in order for students to be able to achieve academically, they must first be fluent in English before they can learn academic content. However, on the contrary, these designated English learners are more than capable of learning academic content and language at the same time. And in fact, recent conceptualizations of language development agree with us on this. Our goal with the English Learner and Design Thinking project was to address this misconception and to bring to light the historical dynamics at play in schools that create unwelcoming learning environments for designated English learners. We also see teachers as being nascent designers, but as Shelley pointed out, there really isn't much design training or focus on design in the curriculum in the United States. Our work is using design literacy and the design thinking process as a mechanism for cultural change in schools to try to promote equity and serve our designated English learners better. Our project provides professional development on design and language development for teachers to help them develop their design literacy. And now I'll hand it back to Shelley, who will go into more detail about our project.
Thank you, Rose. We could go forward one more. Thank you. So as Rose started to say, we conduct workshops, we give small group coaching, and then we also document most of the processes that we and the teachers engage in so that we can better understand how design thinking starts to become part of the way they process the work they're doing in the school. So as Rose explained, we have a problem that is technical, pedagogically, it's social structural, and it also addresses some of the structures that have been built over time that have continued patterns of failure. And we are trying to work against those structures in this project. So when we tend to work with our teachers for a year at a time, and over that year, we take them through design thinking challenges, starting with a process of empathy that they engage around one student in order to better understand that student, to better understand what the student's needs are, and to really gain some insights about that student that are different than the ones they might have started with before they started engaging the empathy process. And we really have found over the years that the empathy process enables the teachers to really see their students in new light. And that is a very powerful part of their being able to commit to making change in the rest of their design project. So once we have teachers go through the empathy process, we then bring them through the rest of design work, having them define a problem and a need, design toward it, prototype, get feedback, put their prototype into action with the student or students, get feedback, and engage in iteration cycles. Next slide, please. Here's the process that we follow, and we start with the empathy process because we find it's the most powerful for engaging them. Then we take them through a definition of the particular problems that they're trying to solve for the students who are English learners that they have in their classroom. We take them through brainstorming, prototyping, and then feedback loops on their prototypes. And one of the things that's very powerful is that when we have teachers start to create a prototype and put it into play in their classrooms or their schools, the lovely thing is that the moment they start getting feedback, they start generating the next ideas for the iterations and the revisions of that. And we often find that when we've left them alone a little bit at that point, when we come back to talk to them, they've done several versions of iterations, or they've scrapped the project and gone back to new empathy and insights and moved along. So we start to find that teachers become a little bit facile with the process as they go along, and then they start to just take it as the way they're practicing trying to solve these problems for English learners in their classrooms. Next slide. So some things that we have learned from this yearly process of working with teachers. And one thing that we're not talking a lot about today, but I think is important, is that their administrators, their school principals, their district level administrators have stayed with us in the project as well. So we are impacting teachers and having teachers impact their work. And we have their stakeholder group, the people that tell them what they can and cannot be doing, also engaged. So there's a lot of support for this activity. But what is truly one of the most important things that has come out of the research we've been able to do on this process is that the empathy process and the kinds of insights that the teachers get from empathy work drive them deeply to motivate them to work on these projects for these students. One of the things that we've seen over time is that teachers have ideas about students when they start these projects, and those ideas change. And I'm not saying easily either, but through the empathy process, they can let go of preconceptions or stereotyped ideas that they have about students who are not speaking English in the classroom, and they are able then to become more responsive. And they also see the problem set as a larger problem set. So at the beginnings of the year, when we survey teachers, they often think that what they're coming to us to learn are new ways to put languaging strategies into play in the classroom. At the end of the project, many of those teachers still are working on languaging strategies like sentence structures or sentence starters or proper ways to apply grammar in the conversation. But they also understand now that the problems are somewhat structural, that the students are bumping up against. Many teachers discover that students who are not speaking English in their classrooms are isolated from other children or isolated from their teachers themselves, or they see the patterns of a structural racism coming into play for their students. And they are designing with those things in mind, as well as looking at, well, I need some new sentence starters because mine have gotten stale for the students. So in many ways, we see that the empathy process, but then this ability to engage in prototyping and feedback cycles turn out to be incredibly important for having teachers make this shift in their understanding of their students and the kind of work that they need to do on behalf of them. Okay, next slide. So Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about Tanya's design journey.
Thank you, Shelley. So to help bring what Shelley just described in our process modeling to light a little bit, we are going to share a case study of one of our teachers from our second year in our partnership with educators. Next slide, please, Rose. So we want to introduce you to Tanya and her design thinking and design literacy journey. Our design thinking cycle begins with teachers collecting data themselves by observing students with the goal to learn about their students' strengths and needs, as Shelley just highlighted. So first, we specifically ask teachers to use an empathy-based approach where we have them document their focal students' activities. So we initially asked teachers to choose a student that they would like to observe and work with throughout the year. And here on the left-hand side where it says empathy chart, you can see how Tanya documented some things that her focal student did, or her activities, such as the things the student said or did in this empathy chart. And for instance, she wrote down that her student said, "I don't know what happened today in class," as she was observing, or that the student cries. That's something that she does, right? Or how she noticed her student doesn't move or does not seek help. So again, kind of highlighting what Shelley described and how students may feel isolated in their learning environment with their peers and with their teachers. So empathy allowed Tanya to see these things that maybe she wouldn't have noticed originally. And this information and empathy-based process allows Tanya to start thinking about how to create a prototype. And we encourage teachers to create a statement that we called an insight statement, where they use the information they learned to get a sense of how that can help them design their prototype. So for instance, here at the top, we see student needs a way to improve her vocabulary because she wants to participate fully in the class and with her peers. So here Tanya is using the information that she learned from the observations and the empathy chart to get a sense of how she can help her student. And as she creates her prototype, on the right-hand side here, this is a snapshot of one form of reflection that our teachers use in terms of how they design and think about innovating their prototypes. So here the image says, which feedback and revision categories best describe your prototype? So this is an earlier first iteration of Tanya's design model, our prototype. And here she indicates that she improved from an earlier prototype, and she also is trying something new. And she is building from this newly empathy discovery. So again, a lot of different moving parts are happening in this reading specialist who is a first-time user of design thinking, right? But she's already finding different ways to create her prototype. Next slide, please, Rose. So what does she do? She went from that insight statement that we just looked at to creating a podcast as a way for her student to try to engage in English conversational skills. And her student was a Russian speaking student. And so her thought was to get her with another Russian speaking student to teach her teacher, Tanya, Russian, while Tanya also was able to teach her Russian students English. And the way she formatted it was to focus on a certain vocabulary list, for instance, animals or types of food. So she tried that with her students, and it gave her the opportunity to converse with her student, but also using a peer in this intimate production setting of a podcast. And again, she was practicing her vocabulary. But she also allowed her students to use Russian, their native language, as a skill set. And it's not ignoring it as they're engaging with their practice of English conversation skills, but really leveraging it and allowing them to be teachers as well, and teaching their teacher, which turned out to be a very cool experience for her second graders. In this iteration, Tanya realized that she needed to use some visuals to kind of help her get a sense of moving the lesson, the little mini lesson with her students. So here in her feedback, she indicates that, again, she's improving on an earlier prototype, and she is still using information she learned from her empathy discovery. But she also, in this round, uses information from an English learner strategy in one of the workshops that we taught. Our reading specialist teachers and admins. So again, different ways of constructing her prototype, and given her experience, we'll use the different resources and knowledge available to her to create her next iteration of the prototype. And the prototype was working so well that she started expanding it to a fifth grade set of Portuguese speakers and trying to get them engaged with how they learn English, but again, also leveraging their Portuguese to teach their teacher Portuguese vocabulary with, again, similar lists that they had in the Russian speaking set. And here on the right-hand side, you can see a little picture that Tanya provided for us, where it was kind of an intro to their podcast with her and her students. And Tanya was very happy with what she saw in her prototype. And one of the quotes that we share in our article is that Tanya says, "What followed was the power of making connections and having empathy with students." And she looks forward to continuing podcasts in the future and in a way to enhance opportunities to practice conversational English with her students. Shelley, I think I'm giving it back to you.
Yes. So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks. So I think the wonderful thing about the example is that we see that this teacher engaged in a very extended empathy process that became interwoven with her ideas for in-class designs that she took up and tried out. And so I think that was very important. So a couple of the ideas I want to leave you with, and then I see a question that came in as well that I'm going to address. So for us, empathy was key to opening up the experience of teachers to better understand the children in their classes. Now, we went to a school board presentation of people who are elected to run a local school board in one of the districts. And the head of the school board asked our team, "So why do you have to work on empathy with teachers? Because teachers are empathetic people anyway." And I did think about this in the context of our work. And what we see is, yes, we start with a very empathetic population, teachers, but they are also very overworked people who are put into a situation where they have, if you're a high school teacher in the United States, you might have 150 to 200 students that you take care of. If you're an elementary school teacher, you may be taking care of 30 or 60 students. And so teachers have they often are working off their general ideas of the situation as they've experienced it over time. And a little bit in that, students can get lost in the, and being responsive to individuals and their learning needs is sometimes not where people are focused. One of the things that our empathy process does is it helps people exercise their natural tendencies to be empathetic and to learn how to get insight from that and apply it in a design process. And I think that that process of empathy work has become very important for our teachers to be able to identify some of the real issues that their students are having in the classroom. And in the particular districts where we work, that turns out to be that some students don't really feel like they have a place in the social system of the school or the classroom. And so teachers have been able to address those problems. So again, calling on empathy has been very helpful in breaking some cycles of education in this particular districts that have not been conducive to the achievement that they'd like to see with the students. And so we find it as very transformational in the process. Someone asked the question, I think it was Eric in the chat, asked the question about what's the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so I think this is a long debated idea, that the differences of empathy and sympathy. But I think one way that we can talk about it is sympathy is having the same kinds of feelings as another person and being able to experience feelings like they have. And I think empathy is a little bit different. Empathy is when you actually try to walk in that person's shoes and you try to learn like they learn or understand the situation like they are understanding the situation. And so in the case of our teacher, her learning Russian, taking it as her task to try and learn a language that's foreign to her, as she's trying to teach her students to transact in English, becomes a very powerful empathy situation for her. So I just want to address that question in talking about this. And so I think what we try to do is have our teachers not just feel sympathy for their students or to feel the disappointment that their students may have when they're not doing as well as they would like to be doing, but to have them learn a little bit like what it's like to work in their students' shoes and take that forward. Okay, so I think that kind of is the big idea I want to leave you with, is that we think the empathy process has been key to opening up teachers to becoming designers and being committed, staying committed to the design and iteration process inside their classrooms. So I'm going to end there, and maybe we'll have more questions in the chat that we could take up now.
Thank you so much, Shelley and Rose and Melissa. It was really, really engaging, and thank you for addressing the question of mine. Another question was from Vijay Kurmar. Would you like to ask your question, please? If you unmute yourself and you can ask your question to Shelley, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. So I have a couple of questions. What type of evaluations can teachers conduct as part of the design thinking course? And how can we relate critical thinking to design thinking? Thank you.
Okay, so those are two separate questions, and I invite others on my team to take them up. So the evaluation question can be twofold. When I first saw your question in the chat, I took to wondering if it meant that what did we do to evaluate how the teachers were doing in their projects? And so I just wanted to let the group know that we do work to see what the teachers are doing and to try to capture some of the changes that they may have in their own learning as we go through these projects. And so we every year administer a pre and a post survey to teachers. And part of the things that we're looking for in the survey is how are they thinking about design and design thinking, what they know of it, and can they apply it in a contextual kind of problem that we give them. And we do that every year at the beginning and the end. So one of the things we're able to learn, for example, is that at the beginning of the year, maybe 34% of, I think one year it was 34% of teachers thought that they knew some things about design thinking and they understood it. And at the end of the year, we had 75% of teachers who felt like they could understand design thinking and could talk about design in their work and understand it. And so we do try to measure things like that inside the teachers. We also have recently created a rubric that we have a record of every teacher's discussion of their projects over the year and their final projects. And we've just created a rubric that we can apply to that to really better understand each teacher's project and where they made progress each year from start to finish. So those are some of the things that we do on evaluating teachers. Then again, we have teachers self-evaluating using that feedback loop when they design something for their classrooms and their students to see if it's effective. And that takes various kinds of forms. One of the things that we've worked on over the years is trying to expand what teachers think of as information that tells them about the efficacy of the work they're doing. And so instead of it just being scores on tests, right, or what we call quizzes, small tests in the United States, or how many assignments were turned in, some of them, or attendance, although attendance turns out for some of the students to be pretty important. We try to expand the teacher's portfolio of the kind of feedback they can be looking for to understand how the child is doing. Sometimes now they're looking for, is the child playing on the playground? Is the child engaging in conversation with other people in the classroom? How often and when? So evaluation takes many forms, and everyone's busy trying to expand how they can evaluate and understand what's going on in the project. And I do have to say it's kind of ethnographic in its approach. So a lot of it is we're watching and talking with people and trying to figure out, what are you doing? What could you be doing? One year, Annie and I, in our workshop, did a formal presentation on how evaluation can be more things than just your test scores. So that's the answer to one question. Anyone besides me want to take up how we connect to critical thinking? Because one of the things when we study the standards in the United States that schools might be using is that they're not talking here in this country about a design curriculum and how important design is. So what we have to do is we have to look at where in the curriculum they are talking about things that embody the work of design and the insights and mindsets of design, and then how we can convince educators that this is where design can play an important role in their curriculum and in their classrooms. Critical thinking is one of those places where in the United States, people will discuss that we want students to be critical thinkers. We want them to solve problems that have not been solved before, that are original problems. And that's the place where we hone in and say, while design is not exactly the same as critical thinking, that you will develop critical thinking skills through design work. And so that's where they mesh for us.
Thank you so much. Convincing. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a next question is from Ursula. Ursula, bravo.
Okay. Thank you. My question, thank you. And yes, my question is, what are the main barriers and facilitators to incorporate design thinking you have detected at the level of teachers and also managers?
Anyone on the team want to take this besides me?
I'll take a stab at this one.
Okay, thanks, Annie.
So in terms of barriers, I think one of the things with teachers, because they're focused on one student with the empathy process and the prototyping process, I think there have been concerns around, okay, well, what does that mean for other students designated as English learners? And so some of our teachers, the strategies that they've come up with, the prototypes they've come up with, were actually beneficial, not just for the one student, but for their entire class, right? So I think thinking about it that way. So it's not, you may start with one student, but your other students, also students who are not designated as English learners, may also benefit from the things that you're trying out in the classroom. And in terms of administrators, they have a lot of stuff on their plate, even more so this year, right? So having them think about using the design thinking process and thinking about what does that mean? And so I think for them, it was finding regular time to meet with them so that they're constantly thinking about, well, what is one piece of the system that we can really improve for these students, and thinking more long-term, right? Not just, oh, what is the curriculum we should select, but how do we create a better support system for our students designated as English learners and their families, in terms of family connection, in terms of ways to engage them outside of the academic kind of classroom. So Melissa, Rose, you want to add other tidbits?
I just wanted to add a little bit
Okay.
about our reading specialists who aren't teachers. So they don't have their students in their classrooms all day, every day. So, and also I think that included one special education coordinator at one of our schools during one of our years. So that's when our teachers have to get creative and figure out when they're going to see or observe their students, whether that's in the classroom, if that's not possible, during recess, during other times, or, it meets with their schedules. Annie said they also have a lot on their plate, and their schedule is just different because they're not teachers in the classroom every day with their students. But what that allowed for our reading specialists too was to collaborate with the teachers of their focal students. So again, design thinking is another way where we can produce collaborations and inspire that amongst not just teachers, but across other educators in their schools and in their districts. So that, I think, was helpful, even though it at first proved to be a challenge for our reading specialist. And then with the pandemic, that was a whole different challenge because it interrupted our last academic year's observation and prototyping. And we had an array of experiences where it proved to be better for some of our teachers, that they were able to meet one-on-one with their students. But then on the flip side, some of our teachers just couldn't really get in touch, or their students weren't responding to them. So again, thinking about, virtual online learning and in-person learning, and how in the future, potentially we can merge those two to think about creative ways to combat potential challenges, but also to increase, I think, more collaborative or resourceful ways of learning and engaging with students and teachers and educators.
There's quite lots of questions popping up, but we'll have only time for one more question. Ryan, would you like to come in and ask your question, please? And this will be the last question. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, this is the second time I've been learning about design learning. And I've just kind of seen some connections between design learning and the Reggio approach. I'm an art teacher in an IB school, and I'm trying to do the Reggio approach for kindergarten, where they have the students come into the classroom and they kind of pick what materials they want to work on, and they design what kind of project they want to work on. And my question is, do you see them kind of connecting together the Reggio approach and the design learning for KG and developing projects for a whole class?
I'm not an expert on Reggio. One of my students did a really nice study of Reggio schools in San Francisco, looking at a few of them and seeing how different they were and how they diverged from the process. But I do think the project orientation of Reggio and the actual engagement with real materials and things in the world do have a lot to do with kind of the work that kids do in design thinking. And we haven't even talked about what kids' work in design thinking is in K-12 in this session, and that's a whole other topic. But yes, I do see that they can be very compatible in that kind of way. Anyone else who might know a little bit more than me? Somebody else in the larger group who knows more about Reggio might want to take this up as well. we have no more volunteers on that.
It's okay. That's really, thank you so much. I think there's a follow-up. If you look at it in the chat, Mark, would you like to just very quickly just make a comment, and then we'll try to close the question session down.
I just wanted to thank you. Sorry, I've had this question burning in my head, and obviously I should have put it in earlier. So it's just about the politics of language, which is what I'm dealing with in a project I'm doing called Becoming Lost and Found in Translation, and about the sort of idea of English being an imperial colonial force. But I don't think I've got time to answer that. That's another session. But thank you. It was really good.
It is another session, Mark, and we'd love to talk with you about it. So maybe we can find a way to do that.
I'll contact you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we'll just, before we close this session, thank you for all the questions. There's lots of questions coming from the participants. So as you can see, Shelley and Melissa and Rose, you stirred up the thinking of the participants today. I just wanted to share with you also, if you are interested about doing research and you have projects you have done and you would like to share this, we are launching a call for submissions for a conference, which is a Learn and Design conference, which will be in 2021 hosted by university in China, Shandong University of Arts and Design in next year in September. And the call for papers is covering 10 different tracks that we'll have, and you might be interested to submit a paper to one of these tracks that will cover some of your research. So there's more will become. We'll circulate the information through various networks, but we hope that you'll be able to contribute, and we will be welcoming your contribution to again to further the ideas about design literacy, and how design literacy can be used in various aspects, whether it will be in education or in terms of how we live and what we do. Can I ask Liv, would you mind, Liv, to wrap up today's session, please?
It has been very interesting, and thank you to all the speakers, Shelley, Annie, Rose, Melissa, and also Kimi, who was not here. I think it's always interesting to learn to know how educational systems are in different countries. So especially when you, Shelley, when you visualized this by these boats, it was very nice to see that, think of US in comparison with Norway, with these boats. And I was thinking, perhaps Norway might be just one state in the United States. United States being about 330 million inhabitants, and Norway is just 5.5. So I always think it's interesting to sort of discuss education, because it's very different from country to country. And it has been nice questions, but I will especially note this, your focus on empathy. And I really hope that you will join us in the coming events and engage with design literacy and ideas, and in the conferences, and that you will continue to participate in developing design literacy as a competence for tomorrow. So thank you to all who have participated, especially the UDD with the Dean Alejandra, and also the simultaneous translation, and especially also to Ursula Bravo and Eric Bohemia. So I hope to see you again in another event, and together we can work for a better tomorrow. So until then, thank you and take care. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Liv. Muchas gracias, Shirley, Melissa, Annie, Rose. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Y solamente para terminar, quisiera invitarlos a nuestra próxima sesión. Ustedes ya, todos los que nos han seguido ya saben, son los días martes, el primer martes de cada mes. Y la próxima sesión va a ser el 5 de enero, en este mismo horario. Y presentará Dirya Jorgansiu, de Oswin University, Turkey, y su presentación es el rol de la crítica en el desarrollo de la alfabetización en diseño en la educación inicial del diseño. Así que quedan todos muy invitados para nuestra próxima charla. De todas maneras, les enviaremos por correo electrónico la invitación más adelante. Muchas gracias.